Hi, it's Ms. Margaret, and I'm back with another story. So, if you remember from last time, we start our story time with a song. So, if you know the words, sing along with me, and if you don't, you'll catch on really fast. It's an easy song. Time for stories, time for stories, over here, over here. Pictures, words, and talking. Pictures, words, and talking. Give a cheer. Yay! Give a cheer. Yay! Okay, today's story is called The Old Woman Who Named Things. And the author is Cynthia Rylant, and the illustrator is Catherine Brown. Here's the story. And here's the front cover. So you see there's an old woman. There's a car I can see. I can see a bit of a house, and I see a dog. So do you suppose that all of these are going to be characters in this story? What do you think? Once there was an old woman who loved to name things. She named the old car she drove Betsy. She named the old chair that she sat in Fred. And she named the old bed she slept on Roxanne. And she named her old house Franklin. There's the lady in her house, and there's her car, Franklin. I'm sorry, the car is Fred. No, I've got it wrong. The car is Betsy. The chair is Fred. And the house is Franklin. Every morning she would get out of Roxanne, have a cup of cocoa in Fred, lock up Franklin, and drive to the post office in Betsy. She always hoped for a letter from someone, but all she ever got was bills. The reason the old woman never got any letters was because she had outlived every single one of her friends. This worried her. She didn't like the idea of being a lonely old woman without any friends, without anyone she could call by name. Here's the house at the top of the hill, and there she is in her car. And what's the car's name? I bet you remember. So she began to name things. She named only those things she could never outlive. Her car, Betsy, had more get up and go than anything around. Her chair, Fred, had never sagged a day in his life. Not one creak or moan had she ever heard out of her old bed, Roxanne. Does your bed ever make any creaks? When you jump on it, does it make noise? And her house, Franklin, had been standing straight for over 100 years and still didn't look a day past 20. And there's Franklin, the house. The old woman never worried about outliving any of them, and her days were happy. One day, when the old woman was out soaping some mud off Betsy, a little shy brown puppy came to her gate. The shy brown puppy wagged its tail. It looked a little hungry. The old woman stood beside Betsy and watched the puppy for a while. She said. There she is. And there's that little puppy. Then she walked back into Franklin, got a chunk of ham from her refrigerator, and came back outside. The old woman gave the ham to the hungry puppy and told it to go home. See, there she's feeding the hungry puppy. She told it that Betsy always made puppies sick, and Fred never allowed puppies to sit on him, and Roxanne wasn't wide enough for a puppy and an old woman to fit on. And besides all this, Franklin would not tolerate dog hair. So the puppy went away. There's a little picture. See the puppy? I think that puppy looks a little sad that it's going away. But the next day, the puppy was back. The old woman was sitting in Fred reading a book, and she saw the puppy through her window. "Go home," she called to the puppy. The puppy wagged its tail when he saw her. "Go home," she called again, but the puppy just kept wagging. The old woman noticed that it still looked a little hungry, so she went to her refrigerator. She gave the puppy a hunk of cheese and 2 biscuits. Then she told it to go home. So the puppy went away. That night, as the old woman plumped up the pillows on Roxanne, she thought about the puppy. There's a picture of her. I think that picture is kind of funny looking. She's wearing a hat. Why is she wearing a hat if she's going to bed? What do you think? It was a very nice puppy, she thought. She's thinking and thinking about that puppy. It was a very pretty puppy, she thought, but it couldn't stay. If it stayed, she would have to give it a name. And she worried that it wouldn't last as long as Franklin or Fred or Betsy or Roxanne. She might outlive it, and she didn't want to risk that. So she would just keep telling it to go home. But every day, the shy brown puppy came to the woman's gate. Every day she fed it and told it to go home. And always it came back the next day. There's the old woman feeding the puppy. This went on for many months. The puppy got bigger and bigger until soon it wasn't a puppy anymore. It was a dog, and it was still a dog with no name. In all this time, the woman had gotten a new dresser that she named Bill, a new wheelbarrow that she named Francine, and a new concrete pig for her garden that she named Bud. Here's a picture of the concrete pig in her garden. It's really a bird bath. See the little bird in there? But the dog she faithfully fed at her gate every day still had no name. Since it had no name, the old woman didn't have to worry about outliving it, and she thought herself pretty clever in this. Then one day, the shy brown dog did not come to the woman's house. She sat in Fred and watched the gate all day long, but the dog never came. The old woman felt sad. The next day again, the dog did not come. The old woman drove Betsy around town looking for the dog, but she did not find it. The old woman felt even sadder. There she is, driving her car looking for the dog. It looks also like it's raining out, so she's even sadder. The poor dog is out in the rain. The following day, when the dog still did not come, the old woman knew she had to do something. She picked up her telephone and called the dog catcher. See there, she's on the phone talking to the dog catcher. "Have you caught any shy brown dogs?" the old woman asked the dog catcher. "We've got a whole kennel full of shy brown dogs, ma'am," said the dog catcher. "Was yours wearing a collar with its name on it?" "No," the old woman said sadly, and she hung up the telephone. The old woman sat and thought about the shy brown dog who had no collar with a name. Wherever it was, no one would know that it was supposed to come to the old woman's house every day, that she was supposed to feed it and tell it to go home every day, that things were always supposed to be this way. The shy brown dog had no collar and no name, and no one would ever be able to know these things about it. There's the old woman sitting and thinking. What do you suppose she's feeling about that dog? What do you suppose she's thinking? The old woman made a decision. She locked up Franklin and drove Betsy to the dog catcher's kennel. She said to the dog catcher, "I've come to find my dog." He asked her what color it was. "It's brown," she said. He asked her how old it was. "About a year," she said. Then he asked her what its name was. There she is, thinking. Uh-oh. The old woman thought a moment. She thought of all the old dear friends with names whom she had outlived. She saw their smiling faces and remembered their lovely names. And she thought about how lucky she had been to have known these friends. She thought about what a lucky old woman she was. My dog's name is Lucky, she told the dog catcher. He led her to a big yard full of white dogs and black dogs and brown dogs. The old woman looked and looked and looked. There they are, looking at all the dogs. And finally, she saw her own shy brown dog sitting beside a gate. The dog was looking at Betsy parked in the driveway. See, there's the dog looking at Betsy. I bet the dog remembers Betsy. The old woman called out, "Here, Lucky!" And at the sound of her voice, the shy brown dog came running. From that day on, Lucky lived with the old woman, and he always came when his name was called. He's driving with her and Betsy back home to Franklin. Look at him with his little head out the window. It turned out that Betsy didn't make all dogs sick, and Fred was happy to let a dog sit on him, and Franklin really didn't mind a little dog hair. And every night, Roxanne was sure to make herself plenty wide enough for a shy, brown, lucky dog and the woman who named him. So think about that story of the lucky little dog that got the name Lucky and the woman who named him. And I'll be back with another story soon. Bye.